And then he put them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the mountain which is opposite Hebron. After this, it came about that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Please be seated. So let me just say at the outset, I'm just so glad to be back. If I could do this, and by the way, if you see like little Jesus here, to know me is to know that Jesus is telling you, serve in the nursery. So you're not saying no to me, you're saying no to Jesus, okay? But if I could, I would so love to take some of you down there and to take some of them down there and bring them here to just see how different it all is. And I think that everybody down there would want to stay up here, which would pretty much turn up here into down there. So that's why we do that. But to go from, this, we're like, to that, which is 6 lanes across, bumper to bumper, for 35 miles. It's just so much more. But it was good to just see the people that we saw. You make that place your home for 20 years, and it's just good to reconnect with people. It was a little weird being back, like as big as it is there. The suburb that we came from, just in the 3 years we've been gone, it's grown by 25,000 people. And even though, this was the cool part, even though the kids were all bigger, like to the point where there was a kid that passed me and I thought, I don't know who that child is. And then they told me, it's like, oh, that's who that child is. But even though they all got bigger, it was just so great to see that our friends hadn't changed. And the fact that we were friends hadn't changed either. It was like picking up where we left off. And it got me thinking a little bit about the word legacy. Not to be overly dramatic, which I do, but what did we leave behind? So on Saturday night, we were at a friend's house with maybe 30 people or so. And at some point in the evening, we took a picture. I'm not putting the picture up here just in case you're waiting for it. When I looked at it, I noticed something. The church that we planted was the reason everyone knew each other. And these folks aren't just friends. For the majority of the people present, like those relationships outside of Jesus and their immediate family, those relationships are the most important thing in the world to them. Like, I don't think they've made idols out of friends or anything, but we use the phrase, finding your people. And that's what happened. They see each other all the time. They're in each other's homes all the time. Their kids are in each other's lives. And it's not like it's a closed group. They welcome new people in all the time. It's incredible. It's beneficial. And I was so thankful that if we've left anything behind, Bree and I, it's what we could of the things of Christ, which included facilitating the forming of lifelong friendships. I'm just so glad that God did that and that we had a part of it. Do you ever give thought to what you will leave behind? If you have an occupation where you are a builder, an architect, an engineer, you can point to structures like advancements. If you're a teacher, you can point to students that are developed and impacted. You have family members and friends that genuinely appreciate you and what you've done. You've meant something to people, and you still do. That's legit. But what about the spiritual? Surprise, you knew it was going there. Because you can do all the things that I just mentioned and also impact people for the sake of Christ. In fact, you can do it while you do those things, and it becomes all the better. This morning, we are in the 16th chapter of Judges, which is also the last chapter of Samson's life. Most of us are at least aware of how he met his end, but seeing those events as part of his larger story will hopefully challenge us to chart a different course. Because the life that Samson leaves behind really isn't one that any one of us would want to emulate. And what we've seen up to this point is a portrait of self-centeredness. Like literally, some of his first recorded words in Scripture were, "I saw a woman in Timnah, get her for me as a wife." He is a toddler in a grown man's body. And the longer a person goes on like that, pretty much is never better. It never means better. The man is, for sure, a cautionary tale. But I believe this happened. Like, I believe it literally took place. And I believe that God preserved the account of his life so that we would learn from it. So I encourage us, all of us, to let the Lord do his thing this morning and teach us. Because this is the inevitable conclusion of a self-centered life. And thanks to the person and work of Jesus Christ, it doesn't have to be the conclusion to our lives more than it had to be with him. Please, if you haven't yet, open your Bibles to Judges 16. I'm going to start reading at verse 1. Now Samuel it there and went into her. Not a great start. What is it with this guy? Actually, I feel like I know what it is with him. I don't think that anyone has ever told him no. He never learned to say no to himself. Like, seminary is great for biblical knowledge, but you also get life knowledge. And one of the best pieces of life knowledge I got was a counseling professor who told me, if you aren't saying no to yourself on a regular basis, something's wrong. And it doesn't feel like wrong. And it doesn't feel like that ever happened with Samson. Now, Gaza is where Gaza was today, or is today. It is the far southwestern part of modern-day Israel. It is nowhere close to where he was before. So he has, for whatever reason, traveled far from home. It isn't that he's just crossed the border and he intends to go back. It's not that he's looking for wife number 2 because wife number 1 met a pretty lousy end. And once he gets wife number 2, then he'll go back. He's on what the Australians call a walkabout. He's just on a foot road trip in a place where he happens to be a conquered minority and a wanted criminal. Verse 2. When it was told to the Gazites, saying, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. And they kept silent all night, saying, let us wait until the morning light, then we will kill him. They set up an ambush. Why? Because this man, up to this point, has killed over 1,000 of their countrymen. If the Philistines had a 10 most wanted list, Samson would have been on it. You'd have seen his picture in whatever the Philistines had as post offices. These guys, they are ready to cash in. They are ready to cross him off that list. Samson's insistence on instant gratification has led to men waiting to kill him. And apparently they waited a while because they wanted daylight. Why? I don't know. Maybe they're scared of him. Like if this happens in the daylight, yes, he can see us, but we can also see him. But they're good to go. Samson, it just doesn't look like he knows what's happening. He doesn't know that there are men waiting in ambush for him. But he confounds their expectations and doesn't wait until morning to leave. He leaves at midnight and then does something that I would classify as incredibly random. Verse 3. Now Samson lay until midnight, and at midnight he arose and took hold of the doors of the city gate and the two posts and pulled them up along with the bars. Then he put them on his shoulders and carried them up to the top of the mountain, which is opposite Hebron. Why would you do this? First of all, it is a feat. This is not a waist-high gate of a white picket fence that you might have at your home. This is closer if somehow you could picture the gate that guards the entrance to Buckingham Palace. They would have been tall. They were made of wood, but then they were covered with metal so that it would resist being burnt down. They would have weighed over 8,000 pounds. He took them well over 40 miles to the top of the mountain, which is opposite Hebron. Gaza is by the sea. That makes it sea level. To get to Hebron, to a mountain opposite Hebron, it's like going from sea level to the top of Kearsarge. Why? Like, I would like to know how he made it past the guards. Because you don't just have a city gate. Imagine behind the gate, there are stalls for guards to be stationed. He would have had to get past, at minimum, 8 people. And I don't know if you've ever tried to remove a metal gate. It's not quiet, but somehow he does this. And I think that at least the best that I can come up with is that he is sending the Philistines a message. You think your gates will protect you. I own your gates. I physically have your gates. If you'd like them back, you can ask. Except it's all about to come crashing down. Enter Delilah. After this, it came about that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. This is new. Okay, not that Samson would go after a woman, but it says that he loved her. With the woman in Timnah, the one that became his wife, he simply said that she looked good to him. With the second woman that we saw at the beginning of this chapter, he didn't even know her. Delilah is different. And just like with his wife, the Philistines come along and they have an offer for her. The lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Entice him and see where his great strength lies and how we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him." Afflict means to make miserable. One commentator translated it as torture. And they will give her 1,100 pieces of silver, and it's each. This is a lot of money, okay? It's hard to find an exact equivalent because a shekel here doesn't necessarily weigh what a shekel weighs there. If it's silver, is it pure silver? So if you just kind of assume some things, it's probably at least $100,000 is what she's being offered. For her, it would have been an absurd amount of money. She will be set for life if she takes it, and she does. So what follows are 3 cycles where she asks Samson for the source of his strength. How is it that he might be bound to afflict him? I don't know how you would respond if someone asked, hey, real quick, if I were to want to render you immobile and torture you, how would I do that? How would one do that? Not even me, I mean, just like asking for a friend, hypothetically, how would something like that happen? He gives her 3 false answers. The first is 7. In verse 7. 7 fresh cords that have not been dried. What is a cord? A cord is a sinew or a tendon. He's saying if you get 7 fresh animal tendons that haven't had time to dry, then he will become weak like any other man. First of all, that's nasty. Secondly, it is yet another violation of his vow. He is not supposed to touch a carcass. And it's not that someone just happened to throw them on him. He's offering it. He says, go ahead and do this. It's not a big deal. It'll make me weak like any other man. I look at Samson and I say, could you please, before we're done, could you do one thing right? Just something. So she gets them, who knows how. She binds him. He lets her. He doesn't care, or she doesn't care that he let her. There are men waiting in another room. She says in verse 9, the Philistines are upon you. And he breaks free. So it happens again, starting in verse 10. This time she scolds him first. You deceived me and told me lies. Now he says, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's actually new ropes. Because tendons look like ropes. It's understandable confusion. I was just playing around. If I'm bound with new ropes, I will totally become super weak, like any other man. Verse 12, she tries again. The Philistines are upon you. And again, men are waiting in the other room. I'm trying to picture these guys going, and then walking away. He snaps them as if they were but a thread. Verse 13, we go again. Which is, did Samson at any point ever think, why do you keep asking me about this? Why is this so important to you? Like if it's a game, I guess I can play. Hey, bind me, I'm free. Woo, that was so great. He just keeps it up. I think he thinks she's playing with him, and so he decides to play with her. The third instance is not as straightforward as the previous 2 because the Hebrew is very clunky. Samson tells Delilah that if the locks of his hair, because they seem to have been grouped into thick braids, almost like dreadlocks, that if those are woven into a loom, he will be in serious trouble. Again, rinse, repeat, because he wasn't telling the truth. She says the Philistines are here. And this time, it seems to be even easier to escape than it was before. He just pulls something out of his hair, and that's that. And at this point, she's going to make him feel like she's had it. Verse 15. Then she said, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have deceived me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength is. But she doesn't stop. She presses him daily, verse 16 tells us. She wouldn't stop, which means they were living together. And he gives in. Why? Because his soul was annoyed to death. Literally, it was impatient to the point of death. If I can just get you to shut up, I will tell you what happened. So he told her all that was in his heart, and he said to her, a razor has never come on my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. Guys, which means, if you've wondered, okay, this whole time that he's doing things he shouldn't do, maybe his parents didn't tell him about the Nazirite thing, maybe he forgot. He never forgot. He just didn't care. If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak and be like any other man. Samson's about to be in big trouble because his self-centeredness has finally caught up with him. And that is the inevitable conclusion of a self-centered life. Self-centeredness will eventually catch up with you. He was with Delilah because he fell in love with her. But that mattered more to him than Israel's prohibition against being with someone who wasn't an Israelite. That mattered more to him than freeing Israel from the oppression of the Philistines. Why was he in Gaza to begin with? Why was he so far from where he should have been living? Throughout the Old Testament, spiritual health is defined geographically. If the people are in the land, they are doing well. If they are not, then they are not. And Samson is leaving home on purpose. He was too busy visiting a harlot to even think about it before this happened. And it's all about to catch up with him in a serious way. It's not that we are all destined for Samson's end, but it will catch up with us if we're doing the same thing and we don't take the opportunity to change course. Because we know every single one of us, me, you, from the youngest to the oldest, we are selfish. We do selfish things. We choose what we want, even when we know it isn't what the Lord wants. Sometimes we don't even consider what it is that the Lord wants. We just do what we like. And if we can't, what we do is we pout. It is what you see in small children. And I don't think, this is not an insult to small children, I don't think we're any different. We've just gotten better at masking it. We've learned how to dress it up. We make it more sophisticated. But at the end of the day, it is all the same. And when it becomes a lifestyle, that's a real problem. If you think to yourself, well, okay, well, it's not a lifestyle for me. Just remember that the only difference between a choice and a lifestyle is simply repetition. Choices over time become a lifestyle. I said this when I started. Samson is a cautionary tale. Let yourself be cautioned and consider a different way to live. Secondly, the inevitable conclusion of a self-centered life is that the mistakes that result can be catastrophic. The mistakes that result can be catastrophic. Samson has finally revealed what's in his heart. He's admitted that he's a Nazirite, which means he's known that all along, like I said. He knowingly went towards unclean things, unclean people. It's highly likely he partook of the fruit of the vine. He's not supposed to do that. The only aspect of his vow that he has kept is his hair, and Delilah is about to change that too. She knows this time is different. Verse 18. When Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up once more, for he has told me all that is in his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. They hadn't done that before. Prior to this, they never brought the money. They sense it too. Sometimes you can just tell. You can just tell. And they could. Verse 19, she made him sleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his hair. Then she began to afflict him, and his strength left him. Remember, they don't have clippers. It's not that all of a sudden you hear zzz. You get these off by sawing them off. How could he sleep so deeply that he didn't notice the cutting of his hair? It says that she afflicted him. Remember, that means make him miserable and is more akin to torture than just like annoying. I don't know what that looks like. But regardless, how do you sleep through that? And I'm brought back to the guards at the gate. How did they sleep through all that noise? And we're fine thinking that that might be God. What if it's God here too? Asleep so that he can take the gates? What if it's God here too? Like, think about that for a minute. That the Lord has said, I'm done. He's just had enough. Not because there's such a thing as a last straw with God, but because we really are capable of pushing it too far. Because when the Philistines come on him, he wakes up, she wakes him up. He says, I'll just go out like I did before. But the Lord had departed from him. Please understand, like, this is not something that God, maybe he didn't want to do it, but couldn't help it because the hair was lost. Like, this isn't the Lord of the Rings where Sauron is powerless because the ring was destroyed. God isn't bound by Samson's hair. It's just that it was enough. Samson had been doing these things for too long. This is not about salvation, okay? Like, if you go back to Jesus and Mary and Martha at the tomb of Lazarus, he's talking to Martha. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Everyone who believes in me will live even if he dies. That's eternal life. And he who lives and believes in me will never die. Okay, so that is eternal security. He will never die. He will never experience spiritual death, i.e., he will never, or she will never, be separated from God. I'm not talking about salvation here. There are such things as decisions that we make where it is not possible to go back to the time before you made the decision. That happens. And if we are living a self-centered life for too long, we can get to the point where mistakes end up being catastrophic. That does happen. In my reading for this, I also came across this note where it says, at the end of chapter 13, that as Samson grew up, the Spirit of the Lord began to speak to him. And so I do wonder if the Lord departing from him had something to do with his ability to sleep. Whereas because the Lord was stirring in him, he was actually having a problem sleeping. Where if God has something for you to do, and you don't want to do it, there are times where the Lord might move on to someone else. But there are other times where God doesn't move on, and instead he's just going to keep poking you until you move. It is possible that Samson had trouble sleeping because he wasn't doing what God wanted him to do. There is a hound of heaven, and he can be relentless, because he knows what's good for you, and he's not just going to let things be. He loves you too much to just let things be. But here we get to, maybe not the worst part, but